So loud. All right, let me screen share and show us the template. I mean, I'm gonna just swing back by and show the sewing supplies kit. So the sewing supplies kit would be here in your modules, and you can click on that. It gives you your sewing supplies. It gives you some images of sewing supplies. And here is your kit that we talked about. Anything that you do not have in your bag, you will be sending me copy and paste. I need these items so that you can pick them up. We can do that. You definitely need those by next week. Okay, so please do that.
Pam, can
Now, yeah.
Sorry, if you can you go back down again, because what I picked up, are we supposed to have the, well, I can't look at it now because you're scrolling, but the commercial and the fabrication packet, are we supposed to have those already?
Okay, so, okay, I thank you for asking, and I went over that, but here we go. So in this baggie, if you do not have these items, the fabric identification packet, and you do not have the commercial packet, and you don't have the miscellaneous packet, then copy and paste this in an email to me so that I can prepare those in a baggie for you and give them to you at an appointment time. So if you're picking up a machine, I'll give it to you when you have your machine pickup scheduled. Or, for example, in the case of living remotely, I will mail them to you. Okay?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't supposed to already have it.
Here's the situation is people have received items at different times because the packets were given out at a wide variety of times. So you may not have it in yours. Some people do have them in theirs because they picked up their packet later. So it's absolutely no problem whatsoever. I just want to make sure everyone has the same packet.
Okay.
And Cara, question?
I just wanted to say that for some reason when I was doing cut and paste, it wasn't working. So I just sent you an email with the names, fabric,
Yeah.
you know, what I'm missing. And then I accidentally sent two because I'm also missing the paperwork. So I updated it for you.
Okay. So did you try copy and then paste it over?
Yeah. And all it did when it pasted in my email was a gray box that totally ruined my
so helpful.
I had to start over.
That is so helpful. Okay. All right. All righty. Well, thank you very much. So everyone's clear on this. Just let me know what you need so that we can get it to you however we can. And you could send the email. That's why we took the time to send the email now. In addition, as Cara brought up last time, in addition to this group of items here, you should add an iron. I have taught you finger pressing, but you should have an iron will help you in this class. Okay, let's go to modules. And I'm hoping that this, okay, let me see if I don't really know if things from two different computers add up to one computer. So let me just head off a screen share. Let me just look for something for a second. So you can see this is what I'm working on, and let's see. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in terms of the sewing template. And let me just see why it's not here. And I'll look and see if it's in assignments. Okay, so I'm going to stop share and I will go to my other computer again. And just hold on a second. I'm going to pause. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to Share and play. Okay, sorry, I'm going to try this again and do a different thing. And I'm not going to. See if I can do it without doing the DVD. Let's see if I can just do it this way. Uh-huh. Okay, well, I have a DVD and I guess it's not, maybe I can do it by starting. Player. No, I don't want that. There we go. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I could record this video so that you could see the video, and apparently that's not going to happen. And so what I'll do is see if there's a way that I can post the video. So instead, I'm going to give you a sewing machine diagram that we'll talk about. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I need to go check on the sewing machine guide. Let's take a 15-minute break and come back at 10:30.
Okay.
15 minutes, everybody. Okay, I'm going to screen share now. Oh, let me go to the correct page of modules and show you the template that I was discussing before. And I don't know why it didn't show up here, but I think I just have to begin to add more things if I'm going to work with two different computers, so that I have to make sure that both, there's some reason I have to update it. So just going to show you this, and I'm going to take you on a screen share. So here we go with the template. So once we go to the Canvas site again, you go to your sewing modules. Here's your sewing resource portfolio and contents and template, which I showed you last time. The complete sewing resource portfolio lists all the items that are in there. I'm just giving you a minimum, and there you go. So these are things that will be included in your sewing resource portfolio. It's due, I think, the 3rd week of October. So all the things that we discussed in class and the hand sewing samples are here. And this blank template page, if you want to use this, I will show you next. So I'm minimizing this indication. This is the complete list by point value so that you can see how this will work. Each sample is to be mounted on a page with a description, a how-to, each step needed to execute the stitch, and then a use, explain what the stitch is used for, okay? And the point value. So these are the ones that we've done so far: the running basting stitch, back stitch, cross stitch, hemming stitch, lock stitch, and whip stitch. Blind stitch is an extra credit. The asterisk indicates extra credit. And on closures, we have discussed the hook and eye or hook and bar and the snap. Okay, and we'll be going on to these button, buttonhole, and Velcro when we start with our sewing machine. Also on this page is the sample page template, which you can use. You can download to mount your samples on. This is an example for hand sewing, how to give a description, the use for that particular item, and then mount your sample below. That would be a blank. And then,
Pam, can I ask a question?
okay,
So for the samples, are we supposed to use the fabric that we cut into 7x7?
yes.
And then for each one, okay.
So this is the sample page described. Please do 1 page for each of your hand sewing samples. You will create the how-to so that you understand how to make the stitch. And this information is in your book and on your handout, and we've got it on the video. That video has been published. Also create the use based on class discussions in your textbook, then mount the sample below. So I've given you the example for running stitch. You can just print this out and stick your sample on it. And this is the information that I've included: hand sewing, running stitch, also called the basting stitch, how to. You can do this in bullet points if you want. You can do a paragraph, however you're going to understand it. The point of the sewing resource book is it's something you can go to when we start making the mask and I say do a back stitch, and you can look it up and you know what the back stitch is. So to make the running stitch, draw your needle through both pieces, taking several small bites at one time. Pull the end of your needle through and leave a thread tail. Do not knot the thread. So it should say continue through to the end of the seam or something like that. And then use. Running stitch is used to temporarily hold 2 or more layers together. It is easily removed after the permanent stitch is in place. And then you just mount your sample, and that takes you to the end of the page, okay? And mount your sample so that your sewing is going horizontally across your page. Then in order to upload this, you can take a picture of your entire page, put it into a Google slide, and all your hand sewing samples can be together, and your Google slides can be indicated as hand sewing samples. You will also do 1 page for your closures. You'll also do a page for your machine sewing samples, okay? But I'm only giving you this 1 hand sewing sample. You can retitle this closures and retitle this machine sewing. So is that helpful for everybody? Does that make it more clear?
Yes.
I think this is the point at which the Zoom screen share stopped working. And when I went into the Zoom or helpline, they had no idea. They just said, that's the first time we've ever heard of that. So, okay, excellent. So if that should be a kind of a good help for you guys. If you can do your template like that, it will make it very clean. Your portfolio will look very beautiful at the end. So you'll have your 6 hand sewing samples and your closures. Here's my plan for the rest of the class. I'm going to show you this video. I have put it onto a screen, and I'm going to screen share from my other computer. I have it already on Zoom. And then everyone will hide their view, and I will hide this view, and I'll go to the other room so that we can see it. At the end of the video, everyone who has 0 questions on their hand sewing, leave the room, no worries. If you have any questions, then stay, and we'll have the last, this video is about maybe 40 minutes because we're going to discuss machines and ironing. So it's made in-house, and what we'll do afterwards is if you are finished and you've got your sewing machine video, hopefully this will record for the entire Zoom class. And then after that, you guys can leave or stay for working lab. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, super. I'm going to pause. Okay. There we go. We're in the middle. So sorry, it's a keystone effect because of what I'm doing. And we're going to start the video. Okay. Okay, this is a Bernina sewing machine. This is a domestic sewing machine, which means that it's manufactured for the home sewing market. Okay, sorry about the sound. Every machine has the same kind of mechanisms as far as the parts of the machine. We'll go over that in detail in a little bit. But first I wanted to talk about the machine in general. A sewing machine is a precision machine, so that the clearances, the way that the mechanics of the machine work are very close tolerances. This needle will come down through the opening, and there is a looper down here which turns around and picks up the thread from the top thread. There's a bottom thread. Those two threads are twisted together to form a lock stitch. So when this machine runs, you can see that it's going pretty fast, and so the tolerances are very close. So the needle will come down, go through this opening here, and interact with this, what is called a looper down here. This spins around and catches the thread from the upper thread, twists it with the bobbin thread, and forms a lock stitch. This is a lock stitch machine. The needle itself is formed with various shapes that work with the bobbin in here. One side of it, the side that you thread from, has a groove in it. If you put your fingernail, you can feel the groove. That is the side of the needle that you threaded from. So this needle has a groove in the front of it. The back of the needle has actually a little dent taken out of it. And that is where this mechanism comes and passes next to the needle. So you can see how precise these various clearances are. I'm going to run the machine and you can see how the mechanics of it work. Very quickly, it goes back and forth, carrying the various threads. The other thing you might notice are these little teeth. And these teeth rotate, and that's what pulls your fabric through the machine. The presser foot, which is this mechanism, comes down. Your fabric is between these teeth and the presser foot, and it's pulled along. So the machine takes care of everything. You don't have to move your fabric, it will move your fabric for you. So you should let the machine run at its own speed. You don't want to pull your fabric through or resist the pull of the machine. The machine is controlled by the foot pedal, and you can control the speed of the machine. If I just go extremely slow, then I get a slow speed. And if I press down further, I get a high speed. And I can slow up again just by controlling the foot pedal. So that's one thing you want to practice in terms of how fast you go. And you can start and stop, no problem. That's always a good thing to do if you're sewing something that's real tricky. And you can go fast. You do not want to sew off the end. You always want to have fabric in your machine as you're sewing. So that's the overall operation of the machine. Just some background, this type of machine was invented by Elias Howe in about 1851, and by 1889 the Singer Company had bought the patent for the machine, and it was in mass production. And in fact, they were even electrifying the machine as early as the 1880s. So the machine as we know it today has been around for a long time. Okay, so to turn the machine on, you may have noticed that I did that before. There's a lever on this machine over here. I can turn it on once and it will be on, but if I turn it twice, I also turn the light on, which is generally what you will want to do. To the parts of the machine, we have thread spools up here, so that's where we're going to put our spool of thread for the top threading. It's going to come through thread guide and this little slot, which is a tension disc, another tension wire down here,
And this is called a take-up lever. This lever is the lever that pulls the thread each time we use the machine. Then we come down, we go through a thread guide on the needle, and we thread through the needle. The bottom thread is in a bobbin case, which is this case. It's the bobbin case, which holds the bobbin. It has a spindle that the bobbin fits on. When you put the bobbin in and pull on the thread, you want to make sure the bobbin's turning clockwise. It's threaded through this little slot on the side and under this plate, which is again a tension plate. It's a spring, but it's a leaf spring. The thread should be to the, when you look at the back of the bobbin, should be to the left of this little finger. And the other thing to know about the bobbins is this little flipper, I'll try to show you without getting in front of it. When you hold on to that flipper, the bobbin won't fall out. So that is a lock to hold the bobbin in the case. Did I save that? Then this bobbin case fits into the slot right there and should click in. It definitely has a way to go in there. You can't just put it in any old way. Okay, now, so that's the bottom thread. This is the top thread. Let me talk a little bit about controls, and I will repeat this information, so you don't have to worry about that. The length of the stitch is controlled with this lever. Here's a symbol that would indicate that. You have short length and long length. 5 is the longest. 0 means that it's not going to advance at all. So when we do basting stitch, we might use a 5. A regular size stitch is a 2.5 to 3. And this also controls the back stitching on the machine, which we'll see later on as simply lifting this lever up to back stitch. And here again is a symbol that indicates that. We often take the stitching out from one show to the next, so we don't want tiny, tiny stitches. This control is for the buttonhole. Many of our machines, we can make a buttonhole using these mechanisms, and you will do that at the end of your sampler. We'll give you further instructions when you get to that point. This control in the center is the needle position. So you can see the needle move back and forth as I move this. If I need the needle to be to the right of the center line, I move it to the right. If I need it to be to the left of the center line, I'll move it to the left. And you would use this as you're doing things like zippers. Sometimes when you're doing cording, you might want the needle on one side or the other. Generally, you're going to have that in the center. This outer ring on this machine controls the width of the zigzag stitch. So a 5 is the widest, and you can see a symbol here, and 0 is straight stitch. So you have everything in between, and it would vary the width of your zigzag as indicated here. You can also see, I didn't mention before, the needle position here with this mechanism. The other very important control is the hand wheel on the end. You will always turn this wheel towards you. And notice that the needle goes up and down, the take-up lever goes up and down as I turn this wheel. Anytime you are changing a stitch or ending your stitching, you want this take-up lever to be at the top, which means that your needle is at its highest point.
Okay. Any questions so far? Anyone have any questions? You can just unmute and talk. Okay. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and start again. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys were following this. This machine is what we have 10 of that we use in the costume studio. And your machines that you will be getting for take-home use will be slightly different, but all machines operate the same way. They are a very precision machine. They're like a car. So this is called the Bernina. If you're getting a Pfaff or a Viking or a Brother machine, they will be similar in that they are all domestic lock stitch machines. They'll all have this, they will all have this sort of a device where there is a thread spool. It comes across, it goes through a tension device, whether it's here or around, down, up, down, and then through the needle. And then there will be a bobbin casing, whether it's here and you access it from the front, or whether it's here and you access it from the top. But all needles will be long groove side towards you or towards the side, and the thread follows the long groove. So whether you have exactly this idea for the stitch width, which goes from 0 to 5 on this machine, the buttonhole mechanism, the stitch length, every machine has that kind of a mechanism. It will have a stitch width, it will have a buttonholing, and it will have a stitch length. This is one of the most important things, that your wheel, you go towards yourself, you're going to wheel towards yourself. And the reason why you do that is you don't want to get this mechanism with the thread balled up and going backwards inside of here, and that would make a big mess of thread. Okay, so we'll begin again. Unless, does anyone have any questions? So we're just going to go ahead.
It releases the, then you don't have any thread down here in the process. My bobbin was loose there. So always turn this wheel towards you. Then on this machine, there's an inner wheel here, which I will talk about later on when we talk about winding the bobbin, the thread onto the bobbin. And that involves this mechanism up here. Okay, so threading the machine, we're going to take our thread, pull it through this back thread guide, come through the slot, the tension discs, go through this tension and spring guide, and then we'll come up here. You can slide your thread into this. It has a shape that allows you to do that. So slide it through, go through the thread guide here at the needle, and then thread the needle. And this needle is threaded from front to back. And if I'm not sure about that, I know that because this thread guide holds the thread in the front. If it held the thread at the side, then I would know my needle threads from the side. So in order to get the bottom thread here, the bobbin thread has to be up on top before I can sew. So to do that, I hold this thread rather firmly. I turn the wheel toward me one rotation, and I know it's one if this goes down and up. And then you can see that I've pulled this thread up. It looped around, caught that thread, and pulled it up. So I want both these threads to be aiming out the back. I can then close my little door for the bobbin. And the hand wheel, one complete revolution equals this take-up lever going down and up, and that's one revolution of the bobbin. The needle will go down and up one time. So one revolution toward me is the way you always want to turn it. I can mention one other thing is that you'll notice I'm keeping tension on this because if I operate the machine without fabric in it, I'm going to create a big knot down here. So I'm pulling this thread out as I'm turning this wheel. So to sew, I'm going to fold this over so I have a little bit more fabric in here. I put my fabric under the thread, and I can use these guides on here. This machine has lines on it that help you to control how far your stitching is from the edge. So if I put my fabric in here and I use this tape, which is at a 1/2 inch mark, I line up my edge of my fabric there, put my needle in, presser foot down, I'm ready to stitch, and this will give me a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I insert the needle into the fabric, and the presser foot goes down. Now the presser foot is obviously this little object, and there's an arm at the back that controls it. What this presser foot does, let me back up here a little bit, is presses my fabric against these teeth. And these teeth are called feed dogs, and they rotate in a circle, and they actually grab the fabric and move it back and forth. I could show you that. I'll take the thread out and show you how that moves. But I want my fabric pressed against those feed dogs. So I'm on a size 2.5 stitch, and I'm on a straight stitch. So I'm going to begin my seam, and at the beginning and end of a regular seam, we back stitch. This lever, that is your stitch length, also is your reverse. So I hold this up, and in this case, in this Bernina, I do have to hold it because it's on a spring. If I let it go, it pops back down.
Okay, just one note here about stitch length. On the Bernina, which is, I think it's a Swedish machine, but anyway, on the Bernina, 2.5 is our average stitch length. On the Singer, if you have a Singer machine, it goes by number of stitches per inch, and that would be about 10 stitches per inch. So whether it's metric and we say 2.5, which is some kind of increment on the machine, or it goes by inches and it would say 10, 12, 24 if you're going to do buttonhole, something like that. Each machine will have a stitch length regulator, and we'll need to find the ideal stitch length for you to use. One of the things to pick is that note that the longest stitch would be the machine basting stitch, and the shortest stitch or almost 0 stitch length would be buttonhole, so it'd be extra close together. So just note that every machine might be slightly different in this case.
So I just went backwards about 2 or 3 stitches, then I let it go, and that ties a knot, so to speak, at the end. So I stitch forward. Now, if I want to make this a bigger stitch, I'll just crank this down. So now I'm lined up with the size 5 stitch. I get a bigger stitch. And we can show these in close up. If I want to do a size, I have a 5 length, and now I'm going to do a 5 zigzag. So this is going to be a very large zigzag stitch. Let's try a slightly narrower zigzag with a.
I want you to note that every time the stitch length or the width changes, the needle is up. You don't want your needle in your fabric if you're changing the stitch width, because that could break your needle, okay? So make sure that your needle's up, particularly when you're changing the stitch width.
Smaller stitch length. So you can vary this infinitely. If you wanted to do an applique on something, you might come down here to practically 0, and then you get very close to it. And if I can backstitch when I'm zigzagging too, so I just simply look at it. It won't go as far. Now, to end my stitching, I make sure my take-up lever is at the top. I take the foot up, so that releases the tension that's on the thread. Pull this out and clip it off, so you can see those different stitches that I was able to do just by changing the control positions. Proper sewing techniques, you would take your fabric, put it under your needle. I'm going to make a bigger bite. Put the needle in, lower the presser foot so that presses your fabric against those feed dogs. I'll start with a few stitches, reverse for a few stitches, and continue my stitching. Now I'm going to keep this along one of those lines so I have an equal distance from the needle each time. I'm just simply guiding this with my hands. I'm not restricting it. I'm not pulling it through. The other thing to notice is that the bulk of my work is out to the left rather than trying to stuff it through this little hole. We always put the bulk of it this way so that you have as little as possible on the inside. So I simply guide this through, keeping this regular on the side so I get an even single ounce. If I have to bring my fingers in closer, I'm going to be on either side of the foot. You don't want to get your fingers under the needle, obviously. Then I backstitch at the end. And when I'm done, I want to make sure that my take-up lever is at the top, which means my needle is at the top, which means there's no thread down in the bobbin. And then I can very easily pull this out and clip it off so that I leave a tail. I always go back to the beginning and clip these threads at the beginning and have a little pile over to the side where I keep my residue so that I can throw that away at the end and keep a neat work area in my sewing area. Winding a bobbin. On a Bernina, to wind the bobbin, I'm going to have to unthread the machine. And I'll wind this up a little bit. I take a bobbin and it's going to go here on the bobbin winder holder. The thread goes around this special thread guide here, and there's an arrow that shows you which way to thread it. Comes over here. I go through one of the holes in the bobbin to secure it. Then I push this over to engage the mechanism. Okay, the other thing I need to do is release the needle bar from going up and down. And to do that, I put my hand on the outside of the hand wheel and I turn the inner wheel toward me until it's loose. That releases this needle bar. Now the needle is not going to go up and down as I'm filling the bobbin. So I've engaged my bobbin by pushing it over. I hold onto this rather tightly so that when I give it the gas, I don't lose that. You don't want this end of the thread to flip over the side, get caught up in the bobbin, because then your bobbin won't work. So once it winds a couple of times and I'm sure that end is secure, I can clip this. Oh, see, I have a little tail, so I'm going to clip that tail. And if my thread spool is wobbling around, then I may put a hand up here and hold that thread in place so that it's nice and steady as it goes on to the bobbin. This bobbin will fill until it reaches the edge of this mechanism, and then it will push away, and that's as full as you want the bobbin to be. You can't, if you overfill the bobbin, it won't work properly in the machine. So we could let that go, but we don't need to fill this bobbin that whole way. So I'm just going to stop here and I can push it away, and then it's done. I can rethread my machine and go on sewing. Before I start sewing, I'm going to tighten this up again, and now my needle bar will go up and down.
Okay, we're going to look at these other two machines. None of you will get a Viking, but we'll look at Pfaff.
This is the Pfaff machine. There are, again, essentially the same controls. It's set up a little bit different, but essentially it works the same. Now this machine, the thread spool holder is sideways in the top of the machine. So you put your thread in, and then there's a mechanism here, a little plastic cap that holds the spool in place. The threading pattern, you want to look for this long arrow here. So the thread's going to go behind that and then come forward, and you'll continue to thread from there. So you don't follow this little short arrow, it's this long one back here through the slot, then up through the take-up lever. Then down to a thread guide on the needle bar and threading the needle. Clip the little hair off the end there. upper thread. Bobbin on this one. Again, a different bobbin. These bobbins are metal, but they don't have any holes in them, so that's how they're different from the Bernina bobbins. The thread bobbin holder looks essentially the same as the Bernina on the inside. It has a little flapper. This one goes the other way. Doesn't have a little finger on top, but it has this opening, and that opening is going to go up. So the same thing applies. I put the bobbin in and it should turn clockwise. I thread it through this little slot and under the tension spring. Then I can open that flapper and that will prevent the bobbin from falling out while I insert it. And again, it should click into place. And I notice that this runs at a little bit of an angle once it's in there properly. Then to draw up the bobbin thread, I do the same thing as I've done before. Tension on the upper thread, turn the hand wheel toward me, one rotation, and I can tell when it's gone one rotation because of the position of my take-up lever. So then I'm able to pull the thread up from the bottom and thread it to the back. So we're ready to sew at that point. This machine's on and off lever is here, so that will turn the light on, this little eye here. Our back stitch is here. Again, a symbol for that. Stitch length is indicated by this dial, and on this machine a 6 is the biggest stitch, all the way down to buttonhole and 0. If you're using a stretch stitch, they do have a special setup for that as well. For the most part, you are going to be in the middle there, right around 3. This is the back stitch lever. So again, it's spring loaded, just hold it down and then release it when you're done back stitching. Straight stitch, zigzag according to width. That's this one. And then the buttonhole controlling mechanisms are here. You would use these in a combination in the order that the machine tells you to do, and when you get to that, you'll learn what that is. These buttons are for other types of stitches, which you may or may not use. Most of the time, you're going to be on this straight stitch button over here.
Okay, we're going to go on to the overlock machine now. Oh, sorry, I have to stop.
Okay, this is
I don't need to do the Bernina again, but now I'm in this weird thing I'm going to have to figure out how to get out of. Let's see. And then let's pause and start again.
Okay, this is an overlock machine, which finishes the edge of your fabric. You may be familiar with this look, this edge stitching, and that's what this machine is for finishing edges. This is a 3-thread machine, so the thread, we use these special thread for overlock. It's a thinner thread, runs off the top of the spool, which is why it needs these guides up here. Then you can see it has a very complicated threading pattern, which hopefully you will never have to change the thread. Just to show you what goes on here, this is complications on inside of the machine. Each thread goes through a series of loopers, thread guides, so that it can form that overlock stitch. As I said, hopefully you will never have to deal with the thread. If it comes unthreaded, Clarice or I or one of the shop assistants can re-thread it for you. So you shouldn't have to deal with that part of it. The operation of the machine is very easy. These will all be closed. This is a little catcher. Oh, I forgot to show you. This not only finishes the edge, it trims as we go. And this flat piece right here is a cutting blade, and there's a matching cutting blade on the bottom. Those two blades come together and trim the fabric as you do the overlock. So that's a special function of this machine as well. So just to show you the operation of it. When you put your fabric in, you want to put it in far enough so that it is being caught by the teeth, which are in the same kind of position as the other machine. So you put your fabric in, press your foot down, same way, it has a lever at the back, just as the other machines. But you don't want to go in so far that you're past the blades. So you can line your fabric up with the edge of the foot or the edge of the machine here to control how much is being cut. Right now, I'm just cutting the little fuzzies off. If I want to cut more, I simply put my fabric further in and guide it that way. So I can go in and out at will. And that little piece goes off. This machine, you want to leave a tail on it when you are finished, and that's what it does. It's a very efficient machine, fun to operate. You're going to love it. This is the professional iron that we'll be using for the class. This brand happens to be Sussman, which is a well-known brand of this type of iron. Some of the differences between this iron and irons that you've used at home are the fact that this iron is heavier, so they come in a 7-pound or a 5-pound weight. The other difference is that it is a gravity-fed system, so the water is held in a container above, and it's a continuous fed system. There's a valve at the bottom of the container up there which opens up the tubing and allows the water to run down to the iron. So we will turn this iron on at the top of the day, and once it's heated up, we open the valve and let the water run into the iron. The iron has to be hot, obviously, before we put the water into it. Another difference is that you'll notice that this iron sits flat on the pad here. You don't set it on the end, and that would be one of the things that's kind of hard to get used to. Operating the iron, you shouldn't have to adjust the temperature. We usually have it on a temperature that works for just about all the fabrics that we're using. The bottom of the iron is Teflon, so it won't stick to most fabrics, but you do want to be careful. We don't want you ironing over rubberized products, or sometimes on a t-shirt if there's a decal that might get stuck on the iron. For the most part, you won't be using fabrics that have that problem. In order to get steam, you're going to hit this little button on the side of the handle, and that lets the steam come out. So in the ironing process, you have your fabric on the board and simply hit that lever every once in a while as you're pressing. You don't have to do it constantly, just every few seconds. You can hear that clicking. That's every time I'm hitting the button. So it gives enough steam, and then I always keep the iron flat on that pad. Now, if you recall the way that you talk about iron, sometimes you talk about ironing, sometimes you talk about pressing, and that's related to the weight of the iron. The fact that the iron has extra weight to it assists you in pressing your fabric.
Okay. I'm going to mute this and go to the other room. Okay. Pardon me. Okay, that is the end of our video, which gives us the whole, I don't know why Deshira's on speaker view, but let me just see if I can get rid of her by pinning this. Okay. That gives us our overview of the sewing machine and of different machines that we have at Santa Barbara City College. The Bernina, the FOF, the Overlock, which is a multi-thread machine, which also cuts the fabric, and the industrial iron. So are there any questions about the sewing machine video? It's a good refresher. I watch it every single time. I find it very, very valuable. So no questions? You can certainly holler them out if you wish. Okay. And then what I'll do is pause the recording, and anyone, I'm going to show one more thing, which is a diagram for sewing machine on our Canvas site. Every sewing machine has a diagram, and you'll be able to find it on the internet. Let's see if it's going to be here. So here's our modules. And we go down to hand stitches, hand sewn closures, comparison shopping guide, and our machine diagram. You can look up the machine diagram for your machine on the internet. Here's a sewing machine diagram. Locate your sewing machine on the internet and find a detailed picture. So this is the detail of the machine that we just looked at for our video. This is a Bernina. Here are the names of each of the numbered items. Sometimes we've used a simplification of a name. So number 1 you'll see is the hinged front cover. Number 2 is the metal piece here above called the stitch plate. Number 3 is the presser foot, or that portion of the needle bar portion that presses the fabric to the feed dog. Number 4 is the needle clamp. This is when you have to remove your needle and replace a needle. Number 5 is a thread regulator. So that would be part of the tension device here, because there's a spring-loaded thing, and as the thread is drawn up and through the take-up lever, number 6, it will create an equal thread. The pre-tension stud, or this is also used for the bobbin threading. As you can see, it go across the top. Number 8 is a tension slot. 9 is a thread guide. 10 is the tension adjustment knob, which when we give you a machine, we ask you, please never adjust the tension. The machines have been gone through by a professional machine repairman, so the tensions will be accurate. If there's a problem, it's generally not the tension, it's generally in the threading. So we recommend that you remove your thread and your bobbin and start the threading process over. Retractable sewing handle, most machines do have a way to pick them up. The machines that we all use are portable, although they are very weighty and it's rather tough to pick them up and move them. You need to have some good arm strength there. Number 12 is a stitch selector lever. Remember on the FOF, your stitch selector lever was down here. So as I said, just like with a car, your gear shift lever can be in many different places, whether it's on the column, whether it's you're doing a manual or you're doing an automatic. There are many choices for the gear shift lever. Same thing with the sewing machine and the stitch selector lever. The most important thing is that you get used to your machine. So you can go through and see the rest of these, the bobbin spindle, the supplementary thread guide so that you can use 2 rolls of thread, 2 spools of thread at the same time. This is the bobbin winder stop. When it's pushed over, it will stop that bobbin from winding. The hand wheel, which we saw, only moves towards you. The hand release wheel, if we push it back and we push these 2 wheels in opposition, it releases this. It's a clutch, just like a car has a clutch with a manual transmission. It releases the needle bar so that it does not go up and down while you're using the bobbin winder, okay? And then this happens to have a power switch right here. The light turns by flipping and flipping it to horizontal. The buttonhole knob, different machines are going to have different buttonholes. Remember on the FOF, it can be down here. The stitch length knob, there's a wide variety of other things that are unique. This is a darner and sewing knob. On the FOF, it's going to be a lever up here. So what I'd like you to do, and this is really important, find your sewing machine. And I'll make this an assignment. Your sewing machine is going to be written on your machine somewhere. This is Bernina 1005, and that's the model. Go on the internet and then find your diagram like this and upload it and show it to me. Okay, questions on the sewing machine. It's a lot of information. That's why the very first thing we do is just the sewing machine stitch maze with no thread. We'll work on threading. We'll do that as a class with each machine, and I can put you into breakout room by machine type. So any questions on this? If there, let me see if you're raising your hands. Okay. No questions. If you don't have a question, I am going to pause the recording. And those of you who have finished your hand sewing may leave. Otherwise, we can use these 45 minutes to catch up on the hand sewing and your closures.